when the laws started to change, I was already doing consulting for other businesses. And people started to come to me and said, hey, you've got employees. How did you do this? How do I afford it? What do I need to do? So I started working in that genre. The day of the shutdown here in California, believe it or not, was the start of my...
Welcome back to another episode of Female Empowered. I am your host, Krista Gurka, and I'm really excited to have Katie Santos here joining me today. We are going to be chatting all things HR, which is a really, really important topic, something most of us know that we kind of need to have, but we're not really sure 100% like what we actually should be doing. And unfortunately, most of us end up reaching out for services after we've had a problem or are in, I'm doing air quotes here, trouble. So let me give you a brief background on Katie. So Katie and I have actually known each other for, I feel like 2020 threw our whole mindset off, but for several years through Pilates, and we're on opposite sides of the country, but she is a wealth of information. And how long has it been now since you started the actual like HR company? You've been consulting for a long time, but how long has the HR company been in existence?
Just about that whole period of 2 years.
Yeah.
But just about 4 years, 4 or 5 years, when people started to change the laws here in California, people reached out because they knew we had employees at our studio. So that's how it started.
Perfect. So I'm going to read this just a little bit, but then I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Katie, because you just have a ton of experience. So Katie has almost 40 years of experience owning and working in wellness businesses, from large clubs to small studios. She's sourced and managed large teams using her systematic approach to build engaged and productive employees. And she has a human resource certification, which is really, really important. She owned her own studio for many years and then consulted for many years as well, and was involved with the PMA, has been involved with Boutique Fitness. We actually just recently got to see each other at Boutique Fitness Summit in real life for a while. And so, Katie, I'd love if you that was like not even a snippet of what your history is. So why don't you, for those of people that might not know who you are, give yourself an actual great introduction of all of your experience.
Thanks, Krista. And thanks for having me on board. And you're right, this is so important. I started in business, in this particular business back in 1982, believe it or not, with all the step aerobics or not even step, it was before step, but started doing some supervision. My dad was a business guy, so I learned at his knee. My grandfather I learned at his knee. And I knew I wanted to own something in this genre. I got involved in Pilates, actually, believe it or not, in the late 80s. I found a book in the library and I thought, oh, this is really cool. And tried to learn how to teach Pilates. And at the time, if you weren't a dancer, forget it. You're not going to even come in and take a class. So I waited around, still was in the fitness realm, until a local club here opened, and they opened with a Pilates room. My future partner was smart enough to realize, hey, Pilates is a thing and maybe we should have a couple of reformers. So I got to working in there alongside a Ramana trained teacher. She was really great, pretty severe, but a really brilliant teacher. Fast forward, we decided, you know what, we're working in this tiny little Pilates room and it's getting to be a thing. Why don't we go open our own place? So 3 of us went out on our own back started in 2002, and did our planning and put everything together, as everyone did back then, independent contractors. We had a great team. And one day we realized a couple of things. One is we were looking out at somebody that was teaching, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, what is she doing with that client? And I can't even tell her not to do that because yikes. And she's representing us, and this can't be good. A fellow large studio near where I am, whose name you guys will all recognize, but I won't use, was audited at the time. They prevailed with their audit for independent contractors, but they said, you know what, it cost us $30,000 to defend this audit. And I thought, you know what, I do not want to stay awake again anymore. A, I don't have control over what my people are teaching our clients. And B, the government could come in at any time. And this is long before laws started to change. So we made the change. It was a little challenging. And we thought, oh gosh, how are we going to afford it? But we never looked back. It was a raging success. And the following year, our revenue went up. And at the time that happened, that was about 10 years before all these laws started to change. When the laws started to change, I was already doing consulting for other businesses. And people started to come to me and said, hey, you've got employees. How did you do this? How do I afford it? What do I need to do? So I started working in that genre. The day of the shutdown here in California, believe it or not, was the start of my college work toward my HR certification, because I figured, hey, I'm doing this. I maybe should have a certification of some sort. So I started Fitness HR right after my certification got done. And that's what I'm working on now primarily, is systemizing businesses, teaching people that it's not so scary and awful to have employees. And you can really create huge value in your business when you come to sell it, which some of us are. We've been in this for a while. When you come to sell that business with a stable of solid employees that know how to run your business, the value is through the roof compared to a stable of independent contractors that could kind of take off and do their own thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on now.
I mean, you were way ahead of the curve. You were way ahead of the curve, because I think even people don't even realize, they just think like, well, everybody does independent contractors. Like, that's just how it's part of, it really is part of like what our industry. And when I speak of industry, I'm talking about like boutique fitness, gym kind of, that's just kind of how it was for so long. They're like, you just hire as an independent contractor. People don't even know what that actually means. By the way, people don't even know that you're not supposed to give an independent contractor feedback on teaching their class, or pay for continuing education, or give them a uniform, or all of that kind of stuff. So I definitely have a lot of questions involved in that. I mean, I will tell you that, I don't know if I actually ever told you this story, but my unfortunate experience with transitioning from independent contractors to employees and having to really learn the HR side of the business was and my accountant was telling me this for a while. So I was definitely eyes wide open that I was skirting the line for a significant period of time. But I was at a point in my business where it was just taking off. Like I say, it was like a bullet train, and I was holding on for dear life from behind, and I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. And unfortunately, there came an individual that was part of our team that started to get the other staff involved in trying to bring a lawsuit against me for misclassification. I know it was ugly, but thankfully, one of my staff members brought it to my attention, and I was able to nip it in the bud, but not before damage was done. And what I mean by damage was, it was damage to our culture. I ended up I did never have an audit from the IRS, thank goodness, but I did have to then sit down and say, I need to restructure my business. Like, I am putting myself at great risk. And therefore, I'm also putting all the other people that rely on me for their income at great risk. So should we get shut down? So I hired an HR person. I had to a new attorney. They came in and did a full HR audit. They interviewed everyone on my team. We sat down, and it was an expense. We finally made the transition, but I couldn't be happier. And like you, I totally agree. My revenue's gone up. My accountability has gone up. My productivity has gone up. Like, our profitability has gone up. So I don't have a ton of turnover. It's really, really wonderful. So I am a big proponent of this. And I use my story so people don't get into that situation, because it's not fun. It is not fun,
No, and it's something that's happening a lot since pandemic times. I had so many panicked phone calls. I wouldn't say a ton, but on one hand, I can count them. Maybe the month after the shutdown, of people calling and saying, oh my gosh, my independent contractor has filed for unemployment, or they don't understand why they can't get unemployment. And now those same people, now that the governments are opening up and auditors are going out, they're the ones that are getting looked at. Mm-hmm. But I'm also a big proponent, not just on the employer side, but my employees, when we shut down, they all could go on unemployment if they wanted. Mm-hmm. Some of them stayed working. My business partner, who had a stroke in 2019, was able to now be on permanent disability because we ourselves were employees. She would not have had that. She would have been in real trouble right now and have lost, her home and everything else. So those kind of protections that you get as an employee, you don't realize that you don't have them as an independent contractor until something crazy happens. And trust me, it's happened to me twice where business partners have gone out sick. And it's happened to all of us when this weird, crazy shutdown. I mean, what else is got in store for us? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I want my people to know they have protections of sick pay, that they have a protection of unemployment, that they have workers' comp if they fall off the trap table when they're changing something. I want that for them. Can I offer paid vacation, or could I? No. But I could also offer perks that, didn't cost us a whole lot, but were valuable from a career perspective for our employees. And we had a team that we could all mentor each other together and be able to share our knowledge with and have a professional respect for. And I think that's really key in our business, especially, is to understand the value of us as professionals, Pilates teachers, especially, sorry, shouting from the rooftops, but we go through a lot more training, with the exception of you guys as physical therapists, than most people in the movement field. So we need that respect.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's looked at, I'd love to get into this. Now, my understanding, and totally correct me if I'm wrong, there are kind of two separate classifications when it comes to contractors. There's like legal classification, and then there's basically like the IRS. So is that correct? And could you speak maybe to if they're like what the differences are and which one we should look towards?
Right. So each state, and there's a lot more states getting on board with everything that California is doing, by the way. There's 6 or 7 states right now that have a similar law. But there's an IRS designation, like you say, and then there's a Department of Labor designation. The Department of Labor's designation is a little bit more contracted in that they have closer to the ABC test than the IRS one does. Like I said, when we made our change, we knew we couldn't meet either one of those way back when. And the primary issue is, as you talked about, control. And that control goes from everything to me telling you, Krista, how to train a client or follow this protocol for an assessment, all the way to you've got to teach a reformer class in this fashion. That's exerting control. The other part of control is, do you as an independent contractor have the ability to make or lose money when you work for me? So let's take, for instance, I as an independent, as a HR certificate consultant, have the ability to lose money because I can dispense my time in working with you. And if you don't pay me, I essentially have lost money. And I can lose that in time or in documentation I give you. So I meet the true definition of an independent contractor. Also, my business is separate from what you do as a Pilates and physical therapy outfit, right? When you hire a Pilates teacher or a fitness teacher to work in your fitness or Pilates business, their work is the same as your core business. And this is kind of where Uber skirted out of their thing. They made themselves a tech company rather than a driver company. So that's another test that most of us cannot pass. Now, I have had clients say, well, I'm a yoga studio and I hired a Reiki person. That's different. Try to explain that to a government employee. They're not going to get that.
No.
As far as they're concerned, that's a movement thing, or you're working in the same studio. I don't care what you do. So in that way, we, in most of our studios, don't meet this criteria. I will say that there's a lot of attorneys that will, unless they specialize in employment law, sometimes they don't give you the whole picture, and they understand that they're giving you that advice and they're not going to be dragged into anything. You know what I mean? So they don't have a lot of skin in the game. Second to that, there's accountants that don't always give the correct advice either. I still have accountants here in California saying to people, oh, yeah, the way you've made a contract for them and it's fine. That's not true. So I'm of the opinion that I want your boutique fitness business to stay in business. I want you to be able to provide movement services to people that need it. That's my highest goal in life. And if I can help you facilitate the ability to stay in business and stay legal and not have to, these kind of penalties, you don't get away from. You don't file bankruptcy on them. They're there forever.
And they're huge. They can take a business down. And unfortunately, you and I have seen it happen, unfortunately. And and if it doesn't take a business down, it really wrecks it for like many years, not only financially, but emotionally and energetically. It is really hard to come back from this. And even like the business that, even if you win, I have a colleague in Manhattan happened to. She won, but what it cost her on the back end was it was a lot. And I don't just mean financially. Again, like even as a physical therapist, before I opened my own practice, when I was a clinical director, we got audited by Medicare for saying, Medicare audits you, Medicare fraud is rampant. We came out okay, we were fine, but the process was so draining on everyone in the business. And I wasn't even the owner, but it was really hard because one, financially, but two, you're just waiting, and all the documentation you have to present and all of these things you have to now like go through. And it's a small business. It's really challenging. So we want to avoid these things as business owners as much as possible. And we're not telling you this to scare you. We're just giving you this objective information. So at least you're going in eyes wide open and knowing what is the right way to do things and what steps you have to take to make sure that you're also financially solvent and able to do that. So can you describe a situation where somebody, and maybe not California, because California is like, no, there's no situation, but that maybe somebody in a boutique fitness space could be an independent contractor, not a consultant like you, but could be like an instructor or even a physical therapist. Is there any room in certain states that could be viable?
I think, let's pick hypothetical state. I would say if you have an attorney that draws up a good contract that you renew every year, and you make sure that the person that you're bringing on doesn't appear on your schedule, to the public, as you said, doesn't wear your uniform, you don't direct them in any way. Best case scenario, they bring in their own equipment and have their own room somewhere. I have had people ask, if I have renters, does that skirt the issue? And in some cases, perhaps. In other cases, like you say here in California, no. But
oh, that's interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt. But so in California, if you had your studio and I went in there as a physical therapist and said, Katie, I want to rent a room from you and I'm going to pay you as my landlord, I would not be an independent contractor?
Physical therapist, yes. Fellow Pilates teacher, we think no.
Oh, interesting.
So these are the kind of things that are only going to be proven out when somebody brings
A
some
case.
sort of legal case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if
And
I went in and said, I'm bringing my own clients, I want to pay you rent to use the reformer, and I pay you for every hour that I use. Because I was like, that is truly the only independent contractor. But in California, it's still wishy-washy.
yeah, yeah. And in some
Interesting.
other states, I'm kind of one of those, I would rather keep you
Err on the side of caution.
and if
Yeah.
I said to you renting's okay and it turned out that it wasn't,
Yeah, of course.
not good.
Yeah.
So I think in some states that's probably okay. If you remember at the beginning of this situation, a friend of ours who we know very well, her whole studio was comprised of renters.
Mm-hmm.
And she got on the phone with me after a week and said, oh my God, my entire income is gone
Mm-hmm.
because they're not renting.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't even call on them to teach for me virtually.
Mm-hmm.
So she was sunk. I either have to pick it all up myself or just shut it down and call it a day, which she ended up doing. So that's the other risk. It doesn't add value to your business. I have a client right now that I'm working with, and she does have teachers who are employees, but then a couple of those teachers also rent from her. I'm like, dude,
ooh, that's
that
yeah.
scares me.
Yeah, we have a couple people in our programs that have had that a little bit, and have kind of gotten pushed. It again, because so many of us are technicians that we don't like understand the back end of the business, not by any fault of our own, but really nobody taught us this. It's engagements we've gotten into based from like, oh, I'd like to do this. Okay, let's do that. And it's one of the first things we try to like, I'm like, it doesn't work on many levels. It doesn't work from a legal perspective, number one. And then it doesn't really work. It's like a conflict of interest almost. Like, how does that work on both ends? Like, what if somebody comes in and they're like, this was my client, and now they're saying, well, I can see you on this day under my schedule. It just doesn't work well. Yeah. It's too great. It's too muddled, I think.
I mean, I think, when we opened our studio, we wanted a culture. We wanted to be different. And I'm sure lots of other studio owners think the same way. I don't want it to be a collection of different people that do different things. Yeah. I want those clients to come to Absolute Center because Absolute Center stood for this culture. And if I had a collection of ICs, like you say, you're moving chess pieces around a board that doesn't make sense. I also wanted to know that we could dispense information that I could trust. Like I said, we literally hid in our office, all three of us, and looked out at this one teacher and thought, oh my God, what's happening? That's so dangerous. And when that occurs in your studio, the client doesn't care if they got hurt. They're at your studio. They don't care the status of that person that was training them.
Nor should they really. Anyway. Nor should they really. It's not their responsibility to understand that,
Yeah. And, everybody's going to get named, and whether they prevail on you or not, again, it's, months of having to answer legal interrogatories and all that kind of stuff. So who wants that? I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the transition from independent contractor to employee. So in the state of Florida, Florida is not as stringent as California.
The Wild West, actually.
It is the wild, wild West with literally everything and anything down here. So even with physical therapy, I have to tell you, like, even speaking to our state, looking at our state practice act, sometimes I'm like, 3 different people have told me 3 different things. So it's very interesting. But we do still have a few independent contractors on our staff. They literally work maybe like 1 hour a week. They go on vacation whenever they want. They sub, they cover for us, these kind of things. They're not technically on the schedule. They make their own schedule, etc. But most people, when I hire them as employees, because I'm the same way as you were thinking with Absolute. Like, I did not love the model when I started my studio of having 20 employees or 20 instructors work 2 or 3 hours for a number of reasons. One, it's a lot of people to manage.
Yeah.
And that's really draining. Two, it was really frustrating to me when I was like, I have a new client. And they're like, oh, I can't. I'm working over at like XYZ studio. And I'm like, that sucks. I don't like that. And so for me, I was like, I would rather have 5 instructors work 30 hours a week for me or more. And that's the model I built, and it's been successful for me. But that transition from contractor to employee was definitely challenging for me. So a lot of questions that we get or objections that I hear from people that are like, oh, I don't really want to make the transition is cost. So can you speak a little bit when people say it's too, like, what are the costs that as an employer we carry when we have employees?
Right. So that was our biggest challenge too. What I did was I sat down and I said, okay, what's on a percentage basis, what is my burden as an employer? And depending on a number of factors, it can be anywhere from about 16 to 20%. When it's higher than that, when you hear those figures, that usually is for a company that's got an entire HR department and they're figuring that in. But for us, it's less. So what we did was we split the burden, so to speak, with our employees. I essentially dropped their pay rate by about 8%. And then it became a sales job. And I said, okay, Lisa, this is what's going to happen. These are you guys are probably like us. We had 9 different pay rates, right? Mm-hmm. Here's your different pay rates. Yep. And this is why we're doing it. But for this, you get sick pay, you get workers' comp, we pay your liability insurance, you have job security, on and on. I did have a couple of objections, mainly around one person said, well, I get to write off my music and my Lululemon and at the time, the tax code had just changed and had done away with that sort of stuff. Not that you could really write it off anyway. So those were all gone. And net win for those employees was they gained actually about 12% when you looked at a total compensation package, right? So all of our employees were on board. At the time, most of them worked at least 15 hours, if not more. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have that transitory stuff. I had one holdout, and oddly, she was the one whose husband had the best job she did this for the love and the passion. Mm-hmm. And she also saw it as a challenge, like, how full can I get my classes? How much money can I make? We appreciated that. She was great at it. So we went back and forth with her a few times. And finally, I sat her down and I said, listen, you're going to have to sign this. And I appreciate where you're coming from, but appreciate that I want Absolute to be here for the long haul. And I want it to be a place where everyone knows they have a solid place to work that isn't going to get shut down. So you've either got to get on board with us, or I love you, see you around the block. And she got on board and we didn't look back. So expense-wise is the biggest question I get, how am I going to do this? It's going to be too expensive. And I advise most of my clients to go ahead and reduce that pay down. A little tricky right now, to be frank with you. But if you can offset that with benefits that are kind of unusual and that make sense for the culture of your studio, I think you'll find that people will get on board with that. Some of the benefits I look at, obviously, I tried every year to get us healthcare benefits. It just was impossible where we are, probably everywhere else. But we got things like, we had mentor hours once a month where my brilliant business partner would sit down for an hour, and it was almost like a post-mortem conference, like let's take this one client and what did we do with them and where do we go wrong? How could we do it different? And all of our people came to that. It was paid for, we paid them for it. And we did things like bringing in industry experts to do teaching for us. We paid for their first aid training, their CPR, their AED. we took them with us when couldn't pay necessarily for them to go to PMA, but when they went with us, they get to hang out with us. They went to dinner and lunch and all that stuff. And we told them, these are the people we think you'll best benefit from seeing. Don't go over here because seen that, done it. You've been down that road before. So all of those sort of intangible benefits were things that our people really loved. Second to that, or on top of that, is we were super organized. So when we brought people in, we explained what the culture of Absolute was. We went through a pretty strident interview process between all three of us. They got job descriptions, they understood the manual, the handbook, all of that stuff. And I remember being so gratified every time a new prospective employee said, wow, it's so organized here. I never had like a schedule the first time I got here. I never knew what my pay was until I actually got paid. And so that made me really happy. If you have those things in place, I think this can be a really successful thing, right?
Yeah, it can be. I actually just had a call with a business owner yesterday who's in the middle of the transition, and we were going over all of that. We were going over the discussion you have with them, and I said, just like you said, Katie, that was great advice. And I think like, just have an open dialogue. I had to basically fall on my sword and say, I effed up, people. Like, I fell asleep at the wheel. I put you at risk. I put myself at risk. And now I am going to pull my big girl pants on and I'm going to clean up my own mess. Now, because for my situation, the culture was so toxic at the time, I actually did not reduce their pay when I transitioned them, because I made that a decision objectively, though. I do not recommend it to other people, but I felt that it was too many things happening at once. And I felt it was too difficult for them to understand. I just felt like they would look at it as another dig into them. Okay. So, but what I tell people now, and when I explain this to, when they if they start with me as an independent contractor, because maybe they're just interested in teaching a class or subbing, and then they like it and we like them, and then they come on as employees, their pay does drop a little bit. But I have all of this the same as you said, like I have it all written out. So even when they interview with us, they already know what will happen when they transition to employ. And we tell them what the benefits are. We provide continuing education stipends for them that go up every year they work with the company. We do provide sick time. We actually started providing health benefits for our full-time employees. The other little tidbit that I have advice for that on insurance that I found, it took us a long time to find health insurance as well, because we are a small company. And what people don't understand is you have to have so many eligible people opt in order to get a good plan. But there are now these, I'm not going to be able to think of the name, but there are basically these cohorts, these co-ops that you can,
right.
that you can go in with other boutique fitness businesses that they all basically pool you together. So there are options out there for people that do want to provide health benefits. You do not have to. That is not a legal requirement for businesses small like ours. And the other thing is, you do not have to pay people salary when they come on as employees. So I think that that's an important distinction to make. So a lot of people think like, well, now I just have to pay them a flat salary. My employees are my instructors. So I say my client-facing employees are hourly employees. So can you speak to like the difference between an hourly employee versus a salaried employee?
Right. So there's exempt and non-exempt. Mm-hmm. Non-exempt is an hourly employee, which means they are not exempt from you paying overtime if they run over 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week, depending on where you are. An exempt employee or a salary employee, it's a little bit tricky. I don't recommend it unless you can pay what the IRS cap is, which I want $656 a week. I can't remember because I just block it out. And it has to be pretty much a professional designation. Yep. So if I went to work for Google as an HR person, I could be on salary, but I have to meet a certain criteria in order to be exempt from overtime.
Yeah. And I think you have to, at least in the state of Florida, I think you have to supervise 2 other full-time employees as well. Yeah. I think in state of Florida, that's the designation to be exempt.
Yeah. It's not, in my mind, it's not really worth it. Mm-hmm. You can change your person's pay rate depending on their job tasks at the moment. Mm-hmm. So like we talked about 9 different pay rates. I had an admin rate. I had a supervisor admin rate. I had class, reformer class, singles, duets, trios, yep. blah, 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 all and on. So you can change those up and down. In fact, some of our younger teachers, when they had just finished our teacher training program, came in hourly because we had them on the front desk. I thought it was really helpful for them to have a presence, to understand the inner workings of what goes on in the front desk, to start to be client facing so they could get their face out there. But then when they taught a class, I still kept them on that hourly rate with a little bump or bonus, not commission, but bonus when they taught.
Okay, so can you elaborate on that more? Not commission?
Yeah. So commission in a lot of states needs to be contracted, and it can be paid differently than their regular pay. In other words, you can pay them monthly. In some states you can pay monthly, most states you can't. But it really needs to be a very clear kind of contractual agreement when you start to pay commission. So I'm a big proponent of a bonus structure, especially now as we're coming out of this and we don't understand, what's our revenue going to be over the next year or so? What am I going to be able to pay my people? I don't even know, right? Most of it's a bit of a crapshoot. So to have a good bonus structure is a really good way to allow your employees to see, hey, there's some more light at the end of this tunnel if we can get to these benchmarks, whatever you set as an employer. So stick with me while I'm paying you this hourly rate, but we're going to try to do these bonuses based on, revenue or attendance or retention or whatever you decide. And I think that's a really good way to kind of cushion the blow for you as an employer and to have some upside as an employee. Because as we know, it's a little challenging to get people to come to work for you these days.
It is very challenging. We all know this. Yes. So what are some of the benefits to a business when they have employees? So we talked about some of the benefits to the employee from being an employee versus independent contractor. What are some of the benefits to the company itself to have employees versus independent contractors?
I would say the number one benefit is knowing that you have a culture that you can trust, assuming that you bring your employees on in the proper way. This way, it's something that you can use to market. When you come to Absolute or when you come to Pilates in the Grove, this is the experience that I know you're going to have. I spent a lot of time in the restaurant business, and one of my mentors said, when we're out to dinner and the chef or the owner comes over to the table and asks you how your meal was, that means he has confidence in what's happening in his restaurant. And I want to feel the same way. I want to know that the people that work for me, I have confidence that they're doing the things that we as a culture have decided are important for our clients. The second thing is, like I mentioned before, is, a lot of us have been in this business a long time, and there's an exit strategy down the road, whether it's 3 years or 5 years from now. We think there's value in our client book, so to speak, and there is, and there's value in our equipment, there's value in our lease, but the biggest value is this book of how to run Pilates in the Grove. And here's how all the employees that go along with this book, here are the keys, pay me a lot more than you could have paid me without that book. And the place is yours. I mean, who doesn't want that?
Right? I know, it's great. I just interviewed Mitch McGinley from the Boutique Fitness. So we talked a little bit about setting your business up for sale. And this was one of the things that we chatted about. So the other thing that I tell people too about having employees is the culture is absolutely number one, because you can set the culture. You could tell them, if you wanted to, I want you to teach every Pilates class exactly like this.
Yes.
You could, if you so chose. You could, vacation has to be approved. You could set that policy, right? So like, if you're paying vacation, which is a great benefit to a lot of people in our industry, because that doesn't happen often, but you could say, listen, we can control this now, where we're not having 15 people out and now there's no one to teach. Okay. And then there's, you can train your staff, because you can provide continuing education, bring people in, et cetera. Now, here's the next big question I get from people. Well, if I'm going to do all of this stuff for them, how do I protect myself from them going out? And you're nodding because you know what's coming next. So when we talk about things like non-competes, non-solicitations, non-disclosures, can you just explain the difference between those terms, what you absolutely should have as a contracts in your business, and the whole basically like non-compete shebang?
So the government really frowns on non-competes everywhere now, because it infringes on the employee's right to earn a living. And I'm of the ilk that if you set your culture correctly, that chances of that happening to you are really minimal. I'll say that luckily for us in 20 years, it never happened that somebody just went down the street, opened up, and took all our clients. When we left, the three of us were working in a big club down the street. And when we decided to start thinking about creating this business, we literally met every week for a year about the business plan and all that kind of stuff. And as we were going through this process, we agreed on two things. Number one is we weren't going to say anything about leaving until we knew this was a viable business that was going to fly. And number two, we pledged not to take or poach clients from that club that we worked for, because we didn't want to start out with that kind of karma, for lack of a better word, right? Of course, as happens in our business, it happened anyway. It turns out that the owner of the club found out about what we were doing, and he brought us in. He's like, I'm really hurt. What happened? And we said, well, listen, Dennis, we really honestly were going to say something to you, but we don't know yet if this is going to fly. And he said, well, is it? And I said, well, I think it is. And I said, but I want you to know we are not going to poach our clients. We're not. If they go with us, oh, well, but we are not calling them up. And he appreciated that. And that's the way we drove our business. And I explained to the people that work for us that, listen, we want to make it a place where you want to work. If you don't want to work here, let's not do it. But we didn't create an atmosphere that was toxic enough that people just felt like, I'm just going to go through Mind Body and take all the phone numbers and down the street I go. I did have an experience where two instructors came over to us from a place 30 miles away, and they called and it was a different operation altogether. They called and threatened these two employees, and you can't take your clients. And they came to me in tears, and I said, listen, you could stand outside their door and hand out your card if you wanted. I trust that you won't do that, but you can take clients wherever you want to go. And that's the truth in our business everywhere, right? So non-competes, we never had anybody sign anything that said you can't work at Club Pilates down the road, because we couldn't do that to them. We said, if you want to go to work down there, just let us know. And as long as it doesn't infringe on your schedule here, good to go. If you need to change your schedule here, let me know. So we kept that open communication, and we never had a problem. That said, I know a lot of people have. What we did have, though, because we created a program called Primal Pilates in our studio, is we had a non-disclosure agreement. So our training methods and our training modalities, we didn't want you to go down the street and use them somewhere else. That said, who can trademark movement, right? Nobody. So that non-disclosure we did have for sure. I know that there are people running scared on these non-competes. I've had clients say to me, I just want to have a non-compete. I know it's not legal, but at least it'll get them thinking about it. And I'm like, that just doesn't ring like a good culture to me. I mean, maybe I'm way too altruistic, but that's my thought. If you're a good person, it would be good for you.
Yeah, there's that saying that's like, people say, well, what if I spend all this money and train them and they leave? And then it's like, well, what if you don't train them and they stay? Like which is the lesser of two evils? It is I can empathize with people that are really worried about people leaving. This is your baby.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, and I used to be like this too. I'm going to throw myself in there too. I used to be very much like everything is happening to me. But my flip side on this now is like, I want to create a culture, and I've worked to create a culture that they do not want to, like, they have it so good with me that, and I don't want to say with me, but they have it so good here at this facility because of the clients that we attract, because of the systems we've put in place, because of the accountability and the stability they have, that they don't want to go anywhere else. And if they choose to do that, then I'm happy that I've had a small part in that journey with them, and I do have open, honest dialogue with everyone on my team. And I say, listen, we all know that there is this like invisible moral line and this moral compass that just should not be crossed. Like, that if there is a client that you met here at Pilates in the Grove that comes to you and says, hey, could I pay you on the side to come to my house? In your gut that that's not kosher, so to speak. Like, just bring it to me.
Yeah.
Bring it to me. I have had plenty of times where I have a trainer on my staff that is a personal trainer as well. We don't do that at our facility. It's fine. She said, she asked me if I could come to her husband. I said, thank you for letting me know. Be gone. Because what will happen is if I find out on the flip side, then I start to question. It's almost like I tell my teenagers, like, lying is always going to get you in a worse trouble. Because if I find out that you're lying, then I start to think, well, what else are they lying about?
Yeah.
So what I've always said to my people is I never want to discourage them from making money ever. Like that, which is why I'm like, if you want to go work at Club Pilates down the road, come to me first. Because guess what? I might be able to give you the hours here.
Yeah.
And then I would rather have almost like first right of refusal. Like, you need an extra hour. I've got it. Like, we have this extra class. So let's just keep open dialogue, because I want you to be happy. I want us to be happy. I want the clients to be happy. And I want to do what's best for everyone involved. We do have non-solicitation contracts for our employees and non-disclosure and confidentiality. Also, just so that we keep our clients' information safe. Like,
yes,
you're not supposed to go grab their information and give it to, like, they think their information is safe with us. Right.
Yeah.
So let's tell people, because I think a lot of people are confused by this. So let's talk a little bit about what you do, like what your services that you offer. If someone who wanted to reach out to you and kind of have an overhaul look at their HR and their back-end processes, what do you provide for businesses?
I have I would love to do this for you package, and this is what you really need, right? A lot of it's based on the time that a business owner has available, that how much work they can do, and their budget. I realize that we're all in tight budgets, and I can't walk into a boutique fitness studio like I can walk into Google and say, oh, give me X amount of $1,000. So my big package is, let's look at your culture. Let's figure out some objectives and some principles that we can build from. And then from there, we're going to create what I call the aspirational accountability chart. If you could have any position in your business, what positions would you want? And yes, your face is probably going to be on a lot of them, but let's just create it anyway. And then from there, let's dial in and see, who do you need right now? What's the most urgent need in your business? For most of us, it's either front desk or it's teaching staff. And then we start to create a job description around that. And that can be through just from the business owner's head, these are the things I want them to do, all the way to let's interview the teachers that you already have, see exactly what they're doing. Maybe they're doing things you didn't think they were doing, or they're not doing things you expected them to. Then we use that to create a job posting. And meanwhile, we're creating a handbook, which is all the legalese. And it's so important to have right now, because one of the biggest litigation areas is employee versus employer litigation. So that kind of gives you the, hey, judge, I've done all the right things for your employer or employee rather. And then, hopefully by then you've got some people to interview. I can help you with interview strategy. Can you interview specific to your culture and the tasks that you need? And does that person fit with what you want? Are they in the right seat and all that? And then manuals, which are all the policies and procedures. What do you want that teacher to do? How do you want them to do it? Again, my mentor, he brought Cold Stone Creamery from like three units up to 300 by creating these nice solid policies. Put the key in the door, turn it to the right, turn to the left, turn the light on. Don't have to be that detailed, but you know what I mean. So once you do all that, then I'm here to check in. I've got 5 or 6 clients right now that have gone through the process, and I'm just there when there's an emergency. This person wants to go on vacation, or this person got injured, or I've got this challenge. How do we go around that? I need adjustments on my handbooks or my job descriptions from last year. So all of those strategies are what I get involved in. I'm in the process of developing a course with a fellow consultant around creating systems from the bottom up, especially like I described with the objectives and principles. And hopefully, once that's done, I've got a book in mind that I've kind of started.
We got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, well, I like to do lots of things.
You like to do lots of things. That's great.
True. Oh, look, shiny thing over here.
That's great. No, I know, right? That's the problem with visionaries. We all have something shiny that's like on the horizon. I think that's really great. And it's also great for business owners, if you're out there, like having somebody like Katie that you can just reach out to with an email. I don't know how else you communicate with your clients, but just to say, hey, I'm having this issue. This is my question. Just somebody that you can reach out to is super, super, super valuable. I know it's helped me tremendously because some of this stuff we just don't know. We're in salty water sometimes, and you don't think it's ever going to be a problem until all of a sudden it smacks you in the face, right? And you're like, oh, holy cow, like I didn't know this would ever be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like a client whose back went out when you were teaching. No. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why you should know it. This is not, it's not taught in business school, even if we even go to business school, and teachers and owners are busy trying to learn the latest, greatest movement stuff and how to take the best care of their clients. This is something that they should be able to outsource. Just like, I don't know about you, but me, it's like social media. I really can't stand dealing with it. I really want to outsource it really badly.
Yeah.
I have lots of good things to say, but sitting down and putting it in a post is troublesome. So
you know what? We only have so much energy from which to work. So like, we don't have to be a master of everything. Like, be a master of what you're really, really, really good at, which, perfectly honest, should be what drives your revenue. And then delegate everything else and get some really good people around you that can help you, like whether it's social media or marketing or systems or HR or, any finance, right? Like anything that you don't have to be, you should know as a business owner, you should at least have like a little bit of a handle on everything, or at least know who you can go to that you trust that is going to give you or guide you in the right direction.
And oversee. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So
and our business is so different. Our HR needs are very different than Google. The stuff that we can do in our business that you can't get away with when you're sitting at, next to somebody at a desk at Google.
Yeah.
Those things need to be talked about,
And it's personal. This is our baby.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's very personal, you know, like this is not, you're not in an office of 300, 400, 3,000 people. This is like, you're directly impacted by things that happen in your company. So let's tell people where they can find you. I will link all of it up in the show notes, but in case everyone just wants to go right now, where should they go find you?
Yeah. So fitnesshr.com. And then Instagram _fitnesshr. I'm still working on my trademark so I can get rid of that underscore.
Underscore.
Yeah. But I've got some complimentary consultations that you can book yourself in for there. And I'm happy to start to talk strategy, you know, compensation strategy. How am I going to make this work in my budget? That sort of thing. All the way through, you know, where do you think I should put my reformers to maximize my space? That sort of stuff. But
yeah, that's great. And I think what's really valuable about you too is that you were in this business for years. So it's very similar to what I tell people. If you want to work with me for business things, this is what I do. And I still do it. Like I'm not a business consultant that deals with every business. Like I work with women that are in boutique fitness. This is what I do, and I do it every day. So you were in this, you owned a studio for years. You have been part of the industry for years. So you know exactly what people's fears are, what they're struggling with when they tell you, but I just like, you understand it. And so you've been there probably most of the time too. And that's really, really valuable. I think when you have someone that really, truly understands what you're going through and where you need to be. So I think that's great. And I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us. And I hope we're going to link everything up in the show notes for sure. So I hope people do reach out to you. You're an invaluable resource.
Thanks, Krista. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and learn from you too. And here's to more in real life stuff soon.
I know. I'm looking forward to the rest of 2022 and into 2023. I had such a great time at the Boutique Fitness Summit and just seeing people for the first time in, you know, I hadn't seen you in, gosh, PMA. I don't even know when it was, probably like it's all a blur to me now, but it's, you know, some of the people that I'm in the mastermind with, most of them I had never met in person. We've been in groups for 2 years. I'd never met in person. So it was fabulous. So, and I heard some great things about your talk. So I thought it was really
thank
good.
you. Thank you
so much. Well, thank you for joining me. And until next time, everyone, bye for now.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.